are Squawking Dead, a podcast pulverizing episodes beyond the Walking Dead universe. Sometimes we give you news, sometimes we make you laugh, but most times we go deep. I'm your host, David Cameo, and I'm joined by Thousand Moms Zero Night, Rachel Burt, and Sharon D, aka Blazy Gardner. We're here to talk about the finer points of episode 3, season 2 of House of the Dragon. In case you've missed our reaction live stream where you got our full hour of impressions, and hopefully some of us. Yeah, I'm so sorry you can't make it every time.
I know.
Your fact person didn't get very many this week because I've been planning on my trip. So I got some up here. I'd like to start off talking about the Brackens and the Blackwoods. I've heard everybody comparing them to Hatfields and McCoys. But what it made me think of even more was the passages in Huck Finn where he stays with a family that is involved in a feud. And even they say, while he's telling the story, he befriends the young Grangerford who's about his age named Buck. And while they're out one day, Buck shoots at a guy that's riding a horse. And Huck's like, why'd you do that? And he's like, well, he's a Sanderson. You know, we're having a feud with them. And Huck's like, what the feud over? He goes, I don't know. It was 30 years ago. Nobody knows what's about anymore.
Only 30 years ago, they forgot.
But what really kind of ties it in is I mentioned last week that had Rhaenyra not let Mysaria go, Mysaria could not have saved her. So it's kind of a circumstance thing. Well, in Huck Finn, this feud finally comes to a head and all of the Grangerfords get killed because one of the young girls in the family says, will you go back to the church and pick up my Bible? And he goes to the church and he brings it back. And when he does, she opens it up and there's a note in there that says 2:30. And then the next day, they're all getting up and getting their weapons and everything because she eloped with one of the Sandersons, the enemy. And so Huck realizes that had he not done that, it may not have happened because he delivered that note unknowingly. He didn't know what he was doing. He was just doing something that she asked. He ended up inadvertently causing the deaths of all of the Grangerfords because when she ran away, everybody went to complete war. All of the Grangerfords died, even Buck. Huck says as he's walking along the river afterwards, he finds Buck's body and pulls it out of the river.
And Buck sounds like Huck.
Circumstance made it happen. We always talk about how things fit together. And this is one of the things where if this hadn't happened, this wouldn't have happened. So if Huck hadn't have picked up that Bible, they all wouldn't have died. If Rhaenyra hadn't let Mysaria go, Eric would have ended up killing her because Eric wouldn't have known he was there.
Auric, for Aegon.
It was just one of those interesting little things. I liked how they did the battle scene. And you're right, it did look like a big Civil War battle. It reminded me of Gone with the Wind when they pull back at the train depot and they just have hundreds of bodies laid out where they've all been injured and they're all waiting for doctors and stuff.
So another example of this is the reverse, which is a note was passed to Rhaenyra from Alicent expressing her loss over her child Viserys.
She had read the note instead of waiting, which I understand why she waited.
Which was still sealed.
She didn't want to hear anything from them at the moment. She was grieving. But had she read that note earlier and responded, it might have been averted. But there is no stopping it now. It's the runaway train now. There's no pulling it back.
I mean, that's a good question to ask even still. But there's also this broken glass effect, right? Broken glass, Kafka's gun, the idea that this meeting ended up happening, where the seed is already planted in their minds of what Viserys actually meant by what he said. That has to come into play. And as I've been thinking more and more about this series and how, first of all, like I said in a couple of episodes already, the interpersonal dynamics between men and women on this show is much more accentuated than it was in Game of Thrones. But I noticed in this episode that in a way, House of the Dragon almost does Game of Thrones a little bit more justice by doing this because it explains a little bit better why the whole quest for Daenerys to claim the Iron Throne, etc., and why people were so threatened by it too. This whole story in House of the Dragon kind of puts a finger on it a little bit better. Like, you know, we don't want this to happen again. We're not doing this with the Rhaenyra thing. And even though those sentiments carry over into Game of Thrones as a post House of the Dragon story, I think it does play well with each other. But moving on to the actual Kafka's gun part and the difference between men and women, what happens now that we know? that they both know that that's what Viserys meant, that this was a story that's passed down between heir to heir since the time of Aegon the Conqueror, the prince that was promised, the Song of Ice and Fire.
Even that doesn't matter, because even if Alicent went to Aegon and said, "Oh, I was wrong. I didn't hear that right. You are not supposed to be the king. It's supposed to be Rhaenyra." Is Aegon gonna take him? No, he's not. He's like, whatever. Even Alicent is not gonna do that, because I listened to a podcast about this not too long ago.
They're wrong, though. We're right.
Why people have trouble admitting that they're wrong, why they have trouble with embarrassment and stuff like that. It was a podcast about a train crash and why the conductors and the people in charge could have averted it by doing something different, but because they had it in their head that they were already doing this, that's the way they went. Even when it was proven this is going to end up being bad, you need to change your plan. He's like, no, I'm doing it right. So it's
By the book.
People who can't deal with being wrong. And the reasoning behind this is, in our histories as humans in the Stone Age, being ostracized or shamed by your group usually meant that you got exiled. If you were exiled at that time in history from your group or your home or your village, you were dead. People had to be together in order to survive. So this is like this deep ingrained thing in our lizard brains. It's also the fallacy of sunk cost, right? I've already put so much into this. I can't stop now.
Who doesn't love the fallacy of sunk costs? I've said it plenty of times in this podcast.
Thank you very much, Saul Goodman, for cluing me in on that one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I came before Saul Goodman, man. But let me actually tag on that, because Rachel and I were talking about this prior to you jumping on, and that was podcasts, or audience for podcasts tend to look at podcasters as experts. And I think every one of us has encountered a moment where the podcaster doesn't get something quite right and it activates our disgust mechanism, and we automatically reject it. In a sense, we defer a little bit of authority to them. You know, we look to them for seeing things that we didn't see and picking up on things that we just didn't pick up on our first watch. And I know that's not necessarily what we do. We do try to do it, but we do emphasize the fact that we're human, and B, we're going to make mistakes that we will try to correct, either on the podcast, which we tend to do, or in the comments, or in our discussions, or in the clips, for the comments to the clips and all that stuff. But I can see why, because I was just trying to answer Rachel, like, we should have a bigger audience. I'm like, well, there's a reason why we might not have a bigger audience, and that's because we're open to making mistakes, and B, we navigate these things together and we discuss these things together to kind of get a bigger picture. There's not one person that knows everything, except for Sharon when it comes to this podcast, because she read the books. There's not one person that really knows more than the other. And that's not the point. The point is to really come together.
I feel like that would make us more relatable for an audience, though. But I guess that's just one group of people, too. The people who are looking for experts in whatever topic we're discussing, that's a group of people. But like, I would prefer to listen to people that I can relate to and be like, oh, yeah, I thought that same thing.
Well, and that's a whole other tribal dynamic, is people wanting to attach themselves or glom themselves to people that think like them.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes these things cross over. That's right. But they're both elements of tribalism. The appeal to authority principle.
I think that Simon Strong.
Sir Simon Strong, that's right. And the actor's name is Simon too, by the way.
I think he's my new favorite character.
Just because he's like, yeah, whatever.
He's like so chill.
There's an odd mirror between Sir Simon Strong and Missaria too, where they were both abused by, in a sense, the Hightowers through Larys Strong in a way. Let's say, oh, Larys burned my nephew and my son.
Well, it was Larys's brother and his father that he killed.
Right,
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Okay, so in a sense, because of all that, Larys is burned in their eyes. So if he's with the Ottos and Aegon and etc.
The Ottos.
Yeah. The Hightowers, whatever. Well, you know.
Yeah, I did know.
So he's touching that, like, yeah, I don't want to, sure, I'll go with you. I have no allegiance to Larys, essentially.
Yeah.
So
he even called him Larys the Clubfoot, which is like, that is like the ultimate disrespect.
The thing that you're not supposed to call.
He's throwing hardcore shade.
Well, it's very casual.
The way they set up Harrenhal was great. Did you notice how the sound design sounded like ghosts as he was walking through the pretty much deserted castle, right? And it's like he just pushes open the door and hears all these people just sitting there eating, like, okay, what's up? But you could hear like screaming and stuff in the background. I mean, it was wind, but it sounded like screaming. Really
How
cool.
long has Harrenhal been like that?
Since Aegon the Conqueror.
So this is like I want to say like 136 or something, 136 AC, which is after the Conqueror. And he burned Harrenhal because Harren the Black resisted him and told him he couldn't have his castle. And so Aegon was like, oh yeah, watch this. And he flew around and just burned it to cinders.
So they've been living like this like 136 years?
Yeah, it's been like 100 and some years since it's been destroyed.
Why not go someplace else?
That's a great question, actually.
Also, it's been 136 years. Why not make some repair? Like, go out and grab a stone.
It's cursed. If that's your stronghold, where else are you gonna
Go.
Now you could have built another castle or something. The problem is every lord that takes over Harrenhal ends up dead. So
Right.
they never last long enough to do any repairs because they all die. The only reason everybody wants it now is because it's strategic. Nobody cares about it otherwise. Even though in Game of Thrones, it's a huge prize, right? Because they give Harrenhal to Baelish. He's promised Harrenhal and then they take it away from him. So if you're the Lord, you still get your rents, everything. You still have a huge fiefdom. Your castle is a shambles. But every lord that tries to move in there dies. So most lords don't want to move into Harrenhal. That's why Simon is not the lord. He's the castellan, which means he's just the caretaker.
He's like the groundsman.
More like a steward.
Larys would be the lord, right?
Larys is the lord, which is why Sir Simon is okay. He's not the actual lord of the castle. But if Larys was to go there, chances are he would die.
Daemon comes in and Simon's like, cool, man. You hungry? I got some stew.
I got some venison.
Got some venison. It's aged well. The peas are...
Sorry, I don't have any red currant.
They're okay. Is what he said.
Yeah, no red currant. Sorry about that.
The way they filmed him coming in on the dragon from the Daemon's eye point of view, where you could see the dragon's head weaving in front of you and see over his wings, that was so cool. The best part of the episode. And Baela on Moon Dancer. It's about time we had some dragon action.
You got ample reaction to in the reaction episode too. But moving to Simon though, Daemon says something very funny. Something to the effect of, people should obey their liege lord. And I was like, Daemon. Oh, Daemon.
Yeah, they shouldn't they?
Pot calling the kettle black, even though Aegon the Conqueror basically destroyed the whole house of black, which is what Sir Simon says. Like, I didn't know that was a house. Now I know that they're gone. So there you are. There's other things that people say that it's pot calling the kettle black at the end of the episode where Alicent says it doesn't matter now. We have to double down. If it comes to blood, I'm not going to die.
She said there was no mistake. She won't even admit that she misheard it.
You can tell her reaction.
Oh, she knows, but she's not going to admit it.
Even if it got out that it was a mistake that Aegon had named someone else, the people don't care. They just want to live. They don't give a crap who's the king or the queen. They just want to be able to feed their kids.
Well,
so
I feel like some people might care.
People who have a monetary investment in who is king or queen. Massaria has a stake in who is queen because, like she said, Aegon is a terrible person. You might be a terrible person, but you showed me mercy. So at least that makes me think of Daenerys. It was Jon when he went to visit her. And
Snow?
Yeah, at Dragonstone. And he's like, you didn't burn the city, which I have to assume is because you don't want to hurt the people, which makes you better than Cersei at least. And that's kind of where they're at now.
Yeah, and Rhaenyra's like, don't mistake my kindness for weakness, B.
Well, she said pliancy. I'm not a pushover.
Basically, this episode was the finding two Master of Whispers, one for each side. Larys is now Aegon's Master of Whispers, and Massaria is Rhaenyra's Mistress of Whispers.
Mistress of Whispers. I like that.
There was a cool visual shot I noticed. Rhaenyra and Alicent in the sept, the overhead shot looking down around the table. They did the same shot with Daemon in the dining room, a shot from above with Daemon on one side of the table and the other people on the other side. It was really cool. They totally matched up the two shots.
So very circular message this episode, like everything comes full circle.
But doing different things, right? One side agrees with, oh yeah, we're with you. Cool. The other side's like, no, we can't be with you, even though I know the truth now. That's it. Nobody's going to believe me.
What is she going to do? It's like Rhaenyra says when she's talking to Alicent, we knew when we were young women that men who have not had war war and who are trained up to fight, they want blood. They want to go out and fight. That's what they train for. That's what they're supposed to do. And once they're set loose, you can't stop them. There's no calling them back now. Aegon already wants war. Aegon's dead set on it. Kristen Cole's already out there.
I never got to the point that I was going to get to, though. With those two, though, now that Rhaenyra has said her piece, she knows that there's no avoiding it, right? But Alicent has always thought herself as not to be taken seriously. I have to play my part, do my thing, move on. And I think, like I said in some of the other episodes with her, there is a bit of a jealousy factor with Rhaenyra because Rhaenyra got to do whatever she wanted and was heir to Viserys' throne. So there's a little bit of jealousy there, maybe even a little hatred. Why does she get to do in a world where women don't have agency? This one was granted agency from this progressive king, quote unquote. So my thing is, now that the glass is broken, there's a couple of reasons why I think this way. I can see Alicent maybe thinking that she can affect certain things. I don't think she can, I don't know, but I don't think she can avert a war. I don't think that. That's going to happen, but maybe she can do a couple of things to spare certain people or avoid some people from being killed, things like that. Or maybe she could influence the way the war is conducted in whatever which way it ends up going. There are a couple things that make me think this. Well, let's drop it here. Helena forgiving Alicent for that night.
Was it for that night, or is it for something that hasn't happened yet?
Let's start with the thing because Rachel had a question about that. Rachel was like, what is she forgiving her for?
Yeah, I felt like I should know this. This should be apparent. But then I reminded myself it's Helena. She may be seeing something that we haven't yet.
Let's say the obvious thing first, though, was at the night where her son was beheaded, she was banging.
Helena doesn't care about that.
Hold on. Let's take a step back because Alicent tried to ask for her forgiveness in the episode before. Helena is just now, let's say, on the surface, remembering her asking for forgiveness and finally saying it now.
Except she didn't ask for forgiveness. She just said, when that night that you came in here, and then Helena said something else and cut her off. So she never said, forgive me for that or anything like that. It was never brought up again. So my feeling is Helena is seeing something in the future that she has to forgive Alicent for. Also, Helena's walls are covered with drawings of her dreams. There's one of a woman on fire, which would be Daenerys.
Or is it the little scale-faced girl? What was her name? Princess?
Yeah. Stannis' daughter, Shireen.
I knew she had a really cool name.
Yeah,
she had a really cool
didn't
name.
we mention her in the first episode? Oh, she was the only innocent person to die. That's what it was.
The way they have it is she's naked, and I think the dragons are next to it. So there was pictures of a man with a wolf head sewn on his body.
Ooh.
Yeah, that would be Robb Stark. Bran at least had like a regular life up until he was 10, 11 years old. Helena has been like this her whole life. So there is no reality for her. There's no difference between reality and what she's seeing because she doesn't know. It's just always been like that. She's in and out. She has no idea what's really going on. And that's why she can't formulate these dreams that she has into predictions because she just has no context and has no idea what's real and what isn't.
Well, and imagine this. Kind of like what I was saying about how Alicent was about to ask for her forgiveness and she cuts her off. She must feel like she doesn't know if now is now or now is in the future, or which is why she probably cuts her off. She's like, where am I in now, or am I in a dream, or am I in one of my seer dreams? So it's like a weird.
One of her other drawings was Jaehaerys in his burial cloak with a slash across his throat.
We do see a little bit of this in Game of Thrones with Bran, and the difference is that he develops his powers slowly. He can see things that are happening now, and then eventually he starts seeing things from the past, like Hodor, how Hodor's name came to be, and the distant past, where
he saw Lyanna Stark having Jon Snow, and she saw Rhaegar and Lyanna get married, and so they knew that Jon was Rhaegar Targaryen,
and Lyanna Stark, Ned Stark's sister.
The difference is Bran had someone to guide him. First he had Jojen read, then he had the three-eyed raven, then he had Sam. Helena doesn't have anybody. Alicent cares about her, but not enough to realize what's going on with her. She just thinks she's different. But Aegon doesn't care. It's his freaking sister, for one thing.
It's also something else. Like, yes, definitely that when we talked about that. But there's something else to it, too. I think her powers have been like this forever. And so, is there any getting used to this? Or do you just go along for the ride? it seems like there was no gradual progression. Bran at least had the luxury of easing into these powers. She has been like this forever, and there's been nobody to guide her through. It just maybe has been all at once, all the time since she was a kid. So it's just that much worse.
It was so sad when she was saying that she didn't feel like she had the right to grieve because all of the other poor women lost their babies more than highborn women.
I mean, she
Girl,
actually got to see it too, probably.
yeah. Child mortality back then, most women watched their children die in front of them.
Right. But she had the luxury of actually seeing it. Like, it's one thing if you hear about it on the news, it's far away from you. It's down there. It's the small folk, whatever. Yeah, I'm up here. I'm up in the Red Keep. But she's seeing this in her visions, probably, is what I was thinking. I wrote in my notes. So she has the luxury of going, what makes me different? I'm lucky. I may have visions and I sound crazy, but hey, my kids are being fed. And one of them died, but lots of kids die. Which is, by the way, made me think of Rachel because we're comparing Allison's predicament. And you're like, she's all fed and she has servants dressing her up and dressing her down, making baths. And I'm like, so she sees it. And I was like, oh, Rachel, you would like that, I think, maybe. Yeah. Still, Allison doesn't know she's a seer, or at least she has an idea that maybe that's possible. But in the end of the day, she sees this and she goes, oh. And we were talking about why does she not love her children? Why does she not comfort them? All this other stuff. I think in a weird way, Helena forgiving Allison maybe even gets Allison to finally start to see her children as something to now cling on to. Her father's out of the court. He's down in Old Town.
Right, he's from Old Town.
Where are the Tyrells from?
High Garden.
The Reach. High Garden, right, okay. Either way, he's gone. That's my point. He's gone. The person that was supposed to give her all the directions, what does she have left? It's this weird mirror of what Rhaenyra is going through. Rhaenyra sends her kids away to be safe, hopefully. Meanwhile, Allison is still stuck with her kids. Doomed or damned as they are, she's like, they're all I have now. Now that she's had some sort of meeting of the minds with Helena, getting that forgiveness, feeling as though she's damned anyway. These episodes have shown us that, well, I'm just going to escape to the arms of my Dornish prince. I'm in hell. Well, I might as well enjoy it. Well, now she sees Helena and she's forgiven her. So maybe she can forge a sort of finally a bridge between them. But then, like clockwork, Kristen Cole asks for her favor, something she and he has so sorely wanted. But now, is it too little too late? He says it very loudly, so he makes it very apparent that he doesn't want to be in secret anymore. He wants this thing to be known. People heard it. They're saddling horses. And I got to tell you, as much S as I give Kristen Cole, there is something to be said about, well, I want to make an honest woman out of you. I don't want to be in the shadows. As crazy as it is, I did admire that on a level.
Dude's going to be dead soon, I feel like.
I think she was not particularly receptive to him as he was leaving. And so he wanted to prove a point and be like, yo, give me your favor. He has no sense whatsoever.
I think Kristen Cole is way too emotional. He has way too many feelings for everything that's going on right now. Bro needs to chill because he's like way more into this than she is. And she's like, dude,
is that true?
Shut up. Yes, I think that is true. Does she have feelings? Maybe, but I don't think they're anywhere near as strong as what Kristen Cole is feeling. He's like head over heels. And I don't even know if it's her or just the idea of, because I think we saw how he felt about Rhaenyra too. And I think that was pretty genuine. I don't know. This dude's just extra thirsty for like anybody.
That's something to actually think about because you're saying, in a way, he's transferring his feelings from Rhaenyra directly onto Allison.
To Allison,
so that's
yeah.
His avatar. Okay.
He's even staying in the same room as Rhaenyra. Well, Allison is staying in Rhaenyra's old room.
He needs to chill out.
Allison just wanted some hot D, and look at what happened.
She got House of the Dragon.
She got hot D and a full cup of emotions to go with it. And now she's like, ugh.
She got hot D and a cape full of baggage. At least there was some humor, right? Because when Simon Strong asked Daemon, he's like, we're going to take the throne. And Simon Strong's like, the throne? It's a big chair made of swords.
Made of swords. Yeah, that was funny.
Ulf must be known as like a big talker, right? Because nobody seemed surprised that he was telling the story, right?
Oh, this is supposed to be Daemon's half-brother?
Right. He must go in and say this all the time to get a free drink out of somebody, right? Because that's what he did. He's like, oh, I got a story, but I don't feel much like talking until I wet my whistle. And so the Dornish guy is like, oh, yeah, get him a drink. So then he starts telling the story. But the way he turned around when, oh, he's behind me, isn't he?
All hail the king! All hail the king!
So he used a word that is going to be super, super important coming up. He said he was a dragon seed.
Seems very obvious, though, isn't it? Of the Targaryen line, he's a seed of the Targaryen tree. He's been pollinated. But is that what they call bastards, maybe? And his name is Ulf Seed? I don't know, maybe.
I think Targaryen bastards are called Blackfires.
Well, wouldn't it
Okay.
depend on where they are? Aren't the bastards named more for the region that they're in?
It's of their house. So, like, Driftmark bastards are called hulls.
Snow,
the River Run.
sand.
Snow is for Winterfell.
Yeah.
Right. Rivers, Alice Rivers, who we see at the end.
The Eyrie was stone. Targaryens have Dragonstone, and they have King's Landing.
The conversation with Ulf, it was more of a storytelling session.
Mm-hmm. Story
And the
time with
Dorn-
Ulf.
Yeah, exactly. Which, that should be a paid gig.
Great way to get free drinks. Tell everybody you're related to the king.
One of the things that I noticed was that Sir Simon keeps mistaking, or I don't know, maybe not, mistaking Daemon as Prince Daemon. The Dornish guy says the same thing. The Dornish guy calls Daemon Prince Daemon.
So, just like we had Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, he was not called the king consort. He is called the prince consort. He is not the king. He is not the royalty. Queen Elizabeth was the royalty. Now, when it's the king and queen consort, which is the other way around, but they call that a queen's good. Don't ask me why. I don't make up the terminology. When he called himself the king, call me your grace, which is a term reserved for
royalty.
the king, he basically committed treason because he put himself as the king when technically he is the prince consort, according to Westerosi law. That's why Sir Strong was so flabbergasted by it, like, oh, okay, because you're here for Rhaenyra, but you're calling yourself your grace.
This is the point I was going to get to, because when he says that the throne, he's taken aback because he's like thinking to himself, for you or for your queen? There's a little bit of that going on. You're here all putting your balls on the table saying, this is for the queen. And you're like insisting on a bunch of honorifics. I don't care, actually, as long as I don't make a mistake in front of you. It's like, do whatever you want. Leave us alone. We're fine. So when the Dornish guy says it also, there's a weird acknowledgement of the truth. Everybody calls him Prince Daemon. It's the world in which you inhabit. If you have the power to execute your will on others and they accept it, that's what happens. It doesn't matter what the truth is. It's what people are willing to accept. And that's the thing that I'm going to probably say a bunch of times.
Here's the thing. Aegon is not going to listen to her anymore. I'm sorry, Mom. This is man business. I could listen to you when we were at peace and everything was safe. As a matter of fact, if he found out that she met Rhaenyra and didn't raise the alarm, he would probably kill her, at least have a trial, because that's treason too.
That's a great question. Do you think that might happen?
So this was obviously not in the books because it was secret, which means the maesters and such would not know about it. I've heard a lot of people complain about it, how ridiculous it was. But I want to point out, like, oh, how could she just sneak in like that and nobody see? First of all, they made a point with Ulf when he said, and how do you know what they look like? Because he's like, you don't look like them. The regular people don't know what the royals look like for the most part. Even Blood didn't know who the queen was, right? Who is this? That's the queen. So why would they recognize Rhaenyra in the nun outfit? Now, she could have covered up her hair a little bit better. That white blonde hair poking out there is a little...
But how would we know it's her?
People
Put on
wouldn't
your
recognize
coat.
her. There's no photos. They don't have TikTok where Rhaenyra's out there doing dances. They have silver hair. That's it.
So the world is existing according to stereotypes, but Ulf knows better. And we know better from Jon Snow. We know, and maybe Tyrion Lannister, sort of. Myth sometimes becomes fact, essentially. This is the thing. He's having this careful tale, like a spider that he's weaving, essentially. And he's like, shh, come on, Dornish guy, come on, you're blowing my spot, bro. And then all of a sudden he gets amped up as the king enters. And he's hoping he's not heard when he says, look at Jacaerys Targaryen, heir to Rhaenyra. It's funny, I hadn't even thought about who Rhaenyra's heir would be until he said it. He's saying, shh, 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 the whole time. And then that one thing that he says very loudly, that kid has brown hair, essentially.
The whole hair thing is kind of a cool callback to Game of Thrones too, because that was how the whole thing started with Jon Arryn. Was Jon Arryn had realized that Cersei's kids were Jaime's and not Robert's because of their hair color. What started the whole War of the Five Kings was that discovery.
And Stark rifling through the notes as Hand of the King.
Well, John Aaron, and then Ned figured it out.
The Maester's writings, if I
The
remember right,
Maesters,
too.
yeah. Brown of hair.
Yeah,
Brown of
exactly.
hair. Yeah.
Exactly.
The hair thing is fairly important. Also, I should mention, like, in the books, Targaryens have violet eyes and silver hair. It's white silver in the show, but in the books, like, it's silver. So speaking of dragons, I do want to talk about the eggs, because you mentioned in the post-show coverage, in the book, it's mentioned that 3 of Dreamfire's eggs are stolen by a woman, and they're taken across the sea to Pentos. And that is what has always been assumed are the eggs that Daenerys has. That's why I was like, because in the books it's surmised that it was somebody years before this happens. What they did in the show was subvert our expectations. I'm sorry if this is a spoiler for anybody. The pinkish egg is going to hatch. So I'm not going to say anything else about that. That leaves the other 3. And the other 3 were the correct colors
For Daenerys's eggs.
for Daenerys's dragons.
Oh, and remember one thing about Game of Thrones is that where do Daenerys and her brother Viserys, where do they end up at the very beginning?
They're at Pentos. That's where she gets
Boom.
the eggs. But see, what's happening here is these eggs are going to the Vale, where they're going to take Joffrey and Joffrey's dragon. And then they may go to Pentos from there. She specifically said, go to your friend in Pentos. When you were a kid, that's where Daemon and Laena stayed. I just wanted to say that, yes, what you said could possibly be correct in context of the show. I just had different
Prince
information
Reggio,
from
by the way.
the book. It could be Daenerys' eggs, which would make them Syrax's eggs.
She said one of them at least was Syrax's eggs. I don't know which one though. But okay, which is good. It ties it in with Game of Thrones possibly, and then
It's just one of those little fun things that people can speculate about, but chances that if we're ever going to find out if it's true or not, who knows? Again, with a little foreknowledge of the books, I know that they're never mentioned.
in its own show lore way, because in Game of Thrones they mentioned, oh, these eggs were stolen, but then it just goes to show with what's written in Fire and Blood that knowledge has been lost to time.
Just like how the feuds start. We have no idea because the victors write the
goes with
histories.
victors. Larys Strong becoming the master of whispers. Something that we didn't really talk about in the reaction videos so much at all, but he plants a seed enough to get Aegon to be sus on his brother Aemond and his mother.
If Game of Thrones has taught me anything, it's not to trust anyone. So I fully believe Larys has his own plans. I don't know what they are. I don't know what his end game is. Larys is out for Larys, and he's going to win the king's trust however he can, which is obviously by feeding him these rumors, which may or may not be true. Who knows? He could have made this up himself. Maybe he's the one starting these rumors.
Well, we know that's not true. Let me put it to you this way. As far as us being omniscient watchers of the show, we haven't yet seen Aemond try to grab any rings. We haven't seen Alicent. We just said a whole bunch of things about Alicent feeling like she has no influence. So why does Larys lie to Aegon about their intentions?
Well, because they want Aegon to stay there. And them saying, we want you to stay here, he's going to be like, no, I'm going to go out and fly. But Larys coming in and saying, well, the people are saying that you were tricked. And if you leave your mom and Aemond, which is the worst thing he can say to him, because who does he trust the least? Aemond. And he's throwing Alicent under the bus at the same time. He's mad at Alicent because she's banging Kristen Cole and not letting him bang her feet. It's true. Right. But at the same time, making himself useful, tricking Aegon into staying. Like they said, if you start with a dragon, then we're all going to have dragons, and then it's just going to go even worse.
It was what Rhaenyra said.
It was what Rhaenyra says, right? So it's hard to manipulate the king if the king is dead. Larys is like, let me make him stay here, but he's smart enough to know that just telling Aegon to stay isn't going to work. You have to trick Aegon into staying.
So that's interesting. It's like a by any means necessary, which means, okay, if I have to cast doubt on Alicent and Aemond to do it.
No, he's mad at Alicent. He knows that Aegon's sorest spot is going to be Aemond, and he is mad at Alicent for banging Kristen Cole. So by doing this, he throws both of them under the bus and ingratiates himself even more.
It's a personal win for him.
And he makes Aegon stay instead of flying off to fight in a battle that'll get him killed. Aegon has never been in a battle. He doesn't know what the F he's doing. Nobody there except Kristen Cole has been in a battle. So Aegon will go out there and just get obliterated. Larys is our Baelish.
Our Peter Baelish.
And
AKA Littlefinger, Littlefoot?
Littlefinger.
Okay.
And Mysaria is our Varys, who is for the small folk.
So let's move into this space because there's an interesting mirror between, not even Larys, Aegon wanting to be a part of the war, and then Rhaenyra saying, I need to put myself out there for the cause. Meaning, both of them desire to put themselves into the fray for different reasons. Aegon doesn't end up doing it because he's convinced by Larys, but Rhaenyra does end up putting her body on the line for peace. Like you said, Rachel, in your own Rachel way, there's a circle here. And yeah, there's a mirror, but the mirror is like a yin yang. One is doing it for peace and ends up doing it. The other one says, I'm doing it for war, and then says, not today. I don't feel like today is quite the day for it, maybe.
In medieval times, young men, especially in nobility, were brought up to fight. That is what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to go to war. Squires who were trained to do this from the time they were old enough to hold a sword. So for Aegon and for his friends, it's about the glory because that's what they're steeped on. The songs are about the heroes of the war and how glorious they all were, which people who've been in a real war know it's not glory at all. It's mud and poop and pee and blood. And,
for those in charge,
death.
though, it is, though.
Right.
Let's
but
be honest.
Back in medieval times, kings fought on the battlefield. Viserys had a peaceful reign. There were no battles. There were no wars. So none of these guys, except for Kristen Cole, have seen any kind of battle. So they're like, yeah. And this was also a big thing in Gone with the Wind, how the young men wanted glory. They wanted to go fight for their freedom and have the glory. And then they realized how it wasn't glory at all. It was terrible.
There's also another layer to this, the obvious layer, which I'll get to, but it's also a matter of the way in which even Aegon regards his father, Viserys. He regards him as the king of ink. And even some people here and there have kind of said Viserys is all right. We didn't have any glory. We didn't have any bread and circuses. We didn't have any of that. People gloss over the fact that, oh, war is hell, blood and fire. Sounds great when you're reading a book, but up close, it sucks. And so you take it for granted.
Remember in Game of Thrones when Dickon's in his first battle and he comes up to Jaime and Bronn, and Bronn's like, so what'd you think about your first battle? And he was like, I was very honored. He's like, no, don't give me that crap. I'm not your dad. Just tell me what you really thought. And he goes, they didn't tell me everybody poops himself when they die. And it's not glory and honor. It's watching your friend get their face caved in and people's arms getting cut off.
Okay, but the obvious thing is the difference between crowns. Aegon is wearing the crown of Aegon the Conqueror, the black-looking one with the sharp edges. And Rhaenyra is wearing Jaehaerys the Conciliator's crown, too, which is very, by the way things are moving, that's what they're embodying. And in a way, the crown itself, outside of the people around these people, motivates them to be the kinds of rulers that they are supposed to embody, at the very least.
So they put the prophecy in the show in order to give Rhaenyra a reason for fighting for the crown so hard and not just making her look greedy. Because in the book, she's just looking like an avaricious, greedy woman who just wants the throne. But in the show, they've made it like she wants to save the realm because she was told about this prophecy.
And honor wishes.
And Aegon was also not brought up to be king because Rhaenyra was going to be.
Which is why he wants to do it for Jaehaerys from such a young age. He wants to give Jaehaerys, before he gets beheaded, the same treatment that Rhaenyra had, essentially. So, okay, that caps a little bit of Aegon's logic.
Since you brought up Jaehaerys, I wanted to talk about Daemon having this vision. Do you think it was a natural vision, or do you think this chick somehow...
Alice Rivers at the end?
Yeah. Did she somehow put it in his head?
I just want to say the look on his face when he stood underneath the leak and looked straight up. Just absolutely furious look on his face.
Oh, at the beginning of the scene,
right when
in the bedroom,
right when he first, and he's walking over, and he looks up, and just the look on his face made me laugh so hard.
It's so funny because I thought of, first of all, this bizarre everything leading up to that bedroom scene. You see the leaking, you see the people acting strangely, you see that there's nobody there. Damon's raring for a fight, and all of a sudden, the dripping in the bedroom started to make sense out of everything. First, on a literal level, what is Chinese water torture? But steady drops falling on somebody's head that starts feeling like boulders after 1,000 drops, essentially. It's maddening. And so these people are mad. I wouldn't even blame Larys Strong for going crazy and killing his father and uncle, I think it was.
Brother. Alice Rivers, when she said that line to Daemon, did it sound to you like she had an American accent? You're going to die in this place. I was like, well, that sounds weird.
I'm going to die in America? And you had a face when we talked about it. And your face made a thing and you couldn't hide it fast enough, I think. When you automatically do that, we're automatically going to know that Daemon sealed his fate by venturing into Harrenhal's halls. But then again, that could be the books and they're unreliable.
There's a theory that Alice Rivers is actually Melisandre, because Melisandre is supposed to be like 400 or 500 years old.
At least very, very old.
Alice Rivers is rumored to be a wet nurse for Sir Simon and for all of the Strongs. Even though she's beautiful, she's supposed to be like really old. That's why I said in the post-show coverage for a minute I thought it was going to be Alice Rivers, and I thought she was maybe with the baby sitting in front of the fire. It was a great surprise to see Millie Alcock.
Young Rhaenyra. Interestingly enough, so that could have been her enchanting Daemon, essentially.
At first, watching that scene, I thought it was just ghosts. Like the place was just haunted. It's terrifying. I'm like, oh yeah, that's definitely a ghost banging at the door. But then at the end, when he comes to and she's standing there and says what she says, I'm like, oh, she did this. It was all her.
If you notice, when he wakes up and is looking around, the biggest, strongest warrior in the kingdom looks absolutely frightened to death out in the Godswood.
At the time, he's looking at young Rhaenyra stitching Jaehaerys' head to his body.
By the way, that was a resin cast of the baby. For that and for the funeral, they did not make the baby do makeup or anything for that.
Going back to that scene, he is witnessing this, and you have to take into account that he is not loving this already, which gets me to thinking there has to be a part of him that he hides very, very well, because most of us really don't like him, that feels responsible for the events that transpired. A, for ruining or trying to ruin Rhaenyra, whom she simultaneously was a stumbling block for his glory, like you mentioned, but is simultaneously does love her. Maybe. You can never really be sure. But in that instance, there is part of that. Like, I ruined this kid. And then also, I ruined Jaehaerys. Like, did I mean for that to happen? I don't know. Or maybe the idea of sending orders without having to be up close. As long as it gets done, I don't have to see it. He sees it now. He didn't go to the funeral. He didn't get to see the body. He's seeing it now. So there's something to be said about that. Maybe there is something there in terms of he feels what we're talking about with men and responsibility. And maybe even men thinking that there's glory in battle and then seeing it up close. He's seeing this up close. He's having a reaction. Then he gets transported to the Godswood, where the tree of the seven gods, one of them.
Remember that is his great nephew.
That's what I mean.
Right.
Yeah.
That wasn't just some random baby. That was the grandson of his brother. He loved Viserys, regardless of what happened. I think a lot of what Daemon does is trying to live up to his brother, but he just doesn't know how to do it.
Yeah, I surmised that in the first season. There's like the tug between forging your own path and then actually loving your brother. Forging your own path, trying to ruin this girl whom you love, Rhaenyra, and yet subverting your self-interest, like your natural instinct to love, kind of like Alicent, right? You're subverting your natural instinct to love your kids because my childhood was taken away. This is according to me. So you're kind of battling two fronts. Everybody's battling their own self-interest versus what is natural to them.
I wonder if maybe subconsciously Alicent distanced herself from her children because of the danger that they are in as heirs. And by distancing herself, she won't be as hurt if something happens to one of them.
Or that she's already poisoned. She doesn't want to spread that to her kids.
Say they had killed Aegon instead.
Aegon or Aemond?
Aemon. She's so distant from everybody except Helena. She's known ever since she married Viserys and started having his children that they were going to be in danger if Rhaenyra came to the throne. And like I've said before, not necessarily because Rhaenyra would want to take them out, but other factions in the country would be trying to take her out and put Aegon or Aemond on the throne. So she would have to kill them in order to keep the peace, or else they would end up just like they are right now with the civil war going on. Alicent's known since they were born that they were in danger. So maybe that is why she's just like, I can't with you.
I can't get too close, basically, because then I'm just going to lose them. Which it's funny, in a weird way, Helena's basically saying out loud what Alicent is thinking. They're going to die anyway, so why mourn so hard?
Alicent even says the stranger comes for us all.
But this is more in response to privilege, in a sense. She's trying to rationalize with somebody who's saying the real stuff. It's kind of like what we said in the last episode, which, why? Why do we have to pretend? And then she tells her why. That's funny because all of that is true. And yet at the end, even though she says there was no mistake, she has to convince herself that there was no mistake, even knowing the truth. But in it, she does a couple things that I don't know was intentional. Did she mean to tell Rhaenyra that Otto is out of office? Even telling her that, she can strategize her opponent.
Did she tell he was out of office or that he was gone?
That he was gone. He's not the king's hand, essentially.
That just meant he could have been traveling, trying to get to other houses.
I can't remember the exact verbiage, but I feel like she made it clear that he was no longer the hand. I think maybe Alicent saw Rhaenyra as her friend because they were best friends growing up. So in that moment, Alicent doesn't have friends. Maybe it was a little bit of weakness because, I mean, yeah, Rhaenyra is enemy number one right now, but she's like, this is my friend and I need to unload some stuff here. And so she did.
You know, it's funny. Even the start of that scene where they meet each other, the first note I wrote was friends again. She doesn't call anybody to
pulled a
take her
blade on her.
Well, I thought it was so funny because Rhaenyra's like, oh, I'm going about this badly. Like it was.
Yeah.
But I think
I've started off bad.
Started off badly.
I think that disarmed Alicent because Rhaenyra was just like, oh, I'm messing up already. So.
Her face, Alicent, the actor's face, throughout half of the scene was like, she had resting sus face is what it was to me. She does let slip certain key things like Otto is gone. I do think she takes the meaning that Otto is not in charge anymore, which is technically true, right? Otto was in charge of the show in terms of the players on the board. He's the guy playing on the chessboard. He moves the king around here, moves the queen goes there, you know, all that stuff. She also says, in terms of strategy, yes, Otto being gone is probably more important on the war front. But she says, and you know how Aemond is, meaning even I know this kid's a monster. This is that too, which she knows what things are. She knows what the state of the union is. Aemond says it, she knows it, dogs know it. But she also knows the reverse is true. Aemond is kind of an uncontrollable, prone to impulses, kill Lucerys sort of situation.
Aemond, I feel for him a little bit because you notice when Aegon busts in on him and Sylvie, Aegon is just laughing his rear end off at him. His friends were not. His friends were like, nah, dude, I'm not laughing at this. Like, no. But he inspires such fear that even Aegon's friends aren't going to laugh at him in this situation.
Aemond inspires such fear.
Right. But with Aegon there laughing at him, he's right back to the hurt little kid that they've picked on all those years. Even though he hasn't been that kid in 10 years, the most fearsome warrior in the realm, and he has the best dragon, still this great guy, but he's still crushed by his brother laughing at him in front of other people. He handles that by saying, whatever, I don't care what you have to say.
Like you're trying to escape a mountain lion situation. He stands up real tall and muscular and well nude and marches off like, nah, I know what I am now.
Any whore is as good as another. I don't care about her.
That too.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that's
meaning
how
he has to
it.
kind of respond, first of all, and without disgracing the king, which was very excellently done. He says, you know what? Okay, water off a duck's back. This is how things are. I know my capacity as a warrior. Don't have to prove anything. People know of it. Dogs smell it off me. I remembered something that you had said also when the kids were teasing Aemond as a child. Aegon was a part of that group as well.
Aegon was the worst of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. It's this weird thing where Larys couldn't have said the more wrong thing to him to get him to stay. Because now Aegon's doing it and emboldened to do it, to knock him down a peg, to treat him like the child that he used to be as a weapon to make sure he'd never get up again. Meanwhile, this is the thing I need to ask you guys. Is it going to be the very thing of Aegon's undoing in riling up Aemond to be impulsive, to grab certain things he shouldn't grab?
What if Larys's ultimate plan is to play Aemond and Aegon off of each other and hope that they take each other out? Who steps in? Jaehaerys is dead.
Alicent. No? Queen Regent?
Alicent, they're not going to, no, she's the Queen Dowager. They're not going to accept her, especially if he's throwing her under the bus too. Aegon have her killed or something because he thinks she's in cahoots with Aemond.
And then maybe she put him up to it too.
So who steps in? Oh, maybe the Master of Whisperers?
Well, see, that's another thing, right? They wouldn't accept the Master of Whispers.
He's the Lord of Harrenhal. So who would be best to step in? They're not going to take Criston Cole as a leader. He's not noble blood.
If he gets a title, which would be ironic.
He's not allowed to because he is a gold cloak. He's a Kingsguard.
That's the thing, though. I'm wondering now, because of the actions of this episode, Gawain Hightower, he's like disregarding, we're going to go to Rosby. Rosby's the town. And there's an inn there, blah, blah, blah. He steps in, he goes, come on, dude, we got to do the thing for the king. It rhymes. That's why I said it. And so when the dragon comes and he saves Gawain's life, there may be something to that. And I don't want to say this. I'm very ambivalent about many characters in Game of Thrones or slash House of the Dragon because they're all awful. But there's something to be said about there's this weird for the little guy thing that I do have inside me where it's like you never know where power is going to come from or
Kristen
influence.
doesn't want Allison, who he is got the hots for, to let her brother get killed on his watch.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
Yeah,
that is why
yeah,
he
without a
saved
doubt.
him. It has no other reason. I love that scene, though, because it also calls back when Daenerys attacked King's Landing, because that's how she came at the ships, was out of the sun so that they couldn't see her. And that's what Bela did. When
The
Cole was
big yellow
looking up
one?
at the sky, you can see the dragon just barely as a speck.
Well, he was lucky there was even clouds to be able to see it.
In season 1, Gawain is who Daemon chose to fight in the jousting tournament. He picked Gawain on purpose to make Otto mad.
Turned out
That's Otto's
it was
son.
the right choice. But moving in on that, all of this is very interesting because I don't know if it was in the reaction or if it was the last episode. What if Criston Cole has ambitions for the throne? From the start of this very episode, Criston Cole is not comfortable with the status that he's gained. He's having a sort of panic attack. He's having trouble focusing on the moment. He's late to the small council. And they mention this sort of at the end of the episode where they do the episode or insider, that he is not used to having this many eyes on him. And so what we may be perceiving as whispers behind his back and sus looks is really him being like, I'm not used to all these people looking at me. Don't like it. I'm used to being the knight that stands by the royalty and not being seen, but doing the things I need to do. What irony would it be if Criston Cole, and it seems to be bearing out that if he sort of gained greatness without actually trying to grab it. I like that narratively. Will that happen? Probably not, but so far it is happening. He finds himself as Lord Hand. What if he gets a title? What if somebody pushes him onto the throne, like Larys? Because just like Otto Hightower guiding Viserys' hand, introducing him to his daughter, things like that, I don't want the power. People look at you. I don't want to be looked at. I want to have the glory without all the trappings. The Dornish king? What? For like a day.
If Aegon were to die, the next in line would be Helena.
Oh, yeah.
So Kristen Cole could marry Helena, which would not put him on the throne in name, but in fact, because Helena can't rule.
Right.
He would be.
She's a woman.
He would be the prince consort, and she would be the queen. What a mirror to Alicent having to marry Viserys.
Right. But then there's the extra sting of she is with the person she's been macking it up with for all this time, basically, which is so Game of Thrones.
And he could still be banging her mom on the side.
So
The girl in the bar who got her rear end smacked by the gentleman with Ulf was Diana, who Aegon violated in season 1. She was a maid, and Alicent had to buy her off and give her the moon tea to abort
The baby.
So that was the girl that
It's Ulf. No,
that
I'm
was
kidding.
her.
You know, that's a trick on the audience because what did Miss Saria say to Rhaenyra? She said, well, you know, if you're not wearing all the things, people aren't going to know who you are. Well, they just did that to us with the barmaid. I had no idea. The audience is sus.
She's
I'm
got fairly
sus.
blonde hair, you know what I'm saying? Maybe she's a dragon seed. I don't know.
Everybody's a dragon seed or black fire something, that whatever it is that bastards are called. So one of the things they said in the episode or insider, when Jaehaerys wasn't killed, Aegon has imposter syndrome. It does accurately frame his movements, at least in this episode. What does Aegon become after this murder, this decapitation of his child? His heir. He's still trying to be a good king, offering himself up in the battlefield, right? That's what a king should at least feel like he should do. And then somebody comes around and says, no, not you, sir. And he goes, yes, not me. But imposter syndrome is so accurate in trying to describe Aegon to a T. Like you said, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's not trained for this.
Well, Aegon was raised his entire life thinking that Rhaenyra was going to be queen. He didn't want it. That was Otto's business. He had no interest in it until he stood up in front of all the small folk in the sept and held up his sword and they all cheered for him. Then he was like, oh, dude, this is cool. Now he's kind of thrust into it and he has no idea what to do. As much as Otto was a snake, he really was trying to lead them in the correct way. Like, he didn't really want to go to war either. But now he's gone. And so Aegon has no leadership. Kristen Cole is a yes man. He's not going to talk back to him and tell him anything. All of his gold cloak guards are his friends. They're not going to say anything to him.
Hell, they can't even keep it in their pants.
He's basically Homelander
like
now.
they're supposed to. Everybody's a sycophant.
And the only person who wasn't, he just banished.
It pairs very well with the possibility when Rhaenyra meets Alicent at the Sept. You see that little bit of doubt as Allison's finally regaling what actually happened that night, because they never got together and talked about it. They didn't huddle. You see that little bit of doubt that, oh, maybe I am an imposter. Maybe I did hear wrong. Maybe she's telling the truth. It ends up working in her favor. Like, right. But that little bit of like, did all this bloodshed happen for no reason? And did I hold on to something that wasn't really mine to begin with? But then it turns out. So I like that you see that, again, mirrors of a circle, but it's a negative of the other. Aegon still doubles down, even though he still doesn't know what he's doing. Rhaenyra doubles down because she knows the truth.
I think Alicent recognized that she was wrong, but what good does it do to admit it now? Her saying anything just discredits her even more. She's already on the fringes. She's already trying to hold on to any vestige of power there, and she's losing it. To come out and say, oh, well, I was totally wrong about that, and it should be Rhaenyra, they would execute her.
I'll drop this here. The whole reason why I said there's a little bit of a broken glass theory here, because you can't unhear or unsee what's been said. It goes back to the actual prince that was promised, because we know the end result is the prince that was promised is discovered in Jon Snow, essentially. The Song of Ice and Fire, Winterfell plus Targaryen. We don't know for sure, but that's not even important. The key here is, how did we get there, really? And I think this moment is bigger than we realize. This moment with Rhaenyra and Alicent, because in that meeting, regardless of what they feel they have to do, what if in knowing what happens, it influences what they do from this point forward to get to that part in the story where Jon Snow is discovered and he's the bastard son of the Starks, but he's at the same time, well, not really. He's not. He's the prince that was promised. Maybe they do things that the books will never tell you that lead up to a successful outcome. I'm not saying that Alicent discovers she has power and can influence people. I'm not saying that necessarily, but it's not about power. It's about influence. What can she do with what little power she feels like she has to influence the outcome that ultimately leads to the Game of Thrones show? Rhaenyra is the same, though. She still has a friend out there that heard what she had to say. They cleared the air. And regardless of the outcome, she is now infected with, oh, she is A, still my friend, and B, even though I have to do things that are awful now, maybe there's a way where I can spare her and her children or whatever, all that other stuff. But it does go a little bit just on a face level. Alicent right now needs her kids more than ever, so she holds them tightly. Helena and Jaehaera can't hold Aemond. He's too slippery to hold. Aegon, lost cause. He's not listening to her. Whereas Rhaenyra sends her kids away. She has to cleave them from her in order to do what she needs to do. Except for Jace, right? Jacaerys and Helena are the two that are left, let's say.
And they were supposed to be married originally.
Helena and Jacaerys?
Uh-huh.
Oh, and Jacaerys being the heir to the throne, according to Ulf.
Alicent could also, while she doesn't admit it out loud, I mean, she could work on the inside to help Rhaenyra too. Like, I'm not saying she will. That's just an option. Because she might possibly realize how terrible her kids are.
She's said as much.
Yeah, they're just
at least
the
about
worst.
Aemond.
So they're really, really leaning into making the blacks the good guys.
I do feel like we're going to see a little bit of a redemption arc with Alicent, though. Meaning, now that she knows the truth, how do you not act accordingly in whatever capacity that you have? I'm not saying she's going to help Rhaenyra at all. I'm just saying there are things you could probably do to limit the bloodshed, maybe embrace her Otto Hightower powers.
She might have been able to get Larys to do stuff, but now he's so mad at her, he won't manipulate anybody for her.
I also wonder what direction Alicent is going to go now that she knows this truth about what Viserys actually meant by his statement. And if whatever Alicent does is what Helena's going to forgive her for.
In advance.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, I like that you paired what Sharondy was saying. Okay.
Maybe she's going to forgive her mom for making her marry Kristen Cole.
She pulled a Otto Hightower on her. I'm going to punish you like Otto punished me, but maybe it was really meant to be.
Ew, Mom, you already had that. I don't want it. Ugh.
Yeah, she does know everything, doesn't she?
Isn't she like the most sympathetic character on the show for real? She just doesn't know. She's just out there trying to live her life.
I mean, besides the literal bebes, yes, Helena, I do feel for her.
Yeah, there's a scant few amount of people that we can ever feel bad for. Really, like truly. Rhaenys is flawless. Flawless knowledge, flawless
her poker
beauty.
face is beautiful.
It's funny how she acts accordingly in Rhaenyra's council. And then drops little tiny knowledge on them. Hey, boys, maybe you should Not feel yourselves. So, in the conversation between she and Corlys, she mentions that two possible heirs to Corlys. I'll get to everything, Sharondy, that you can't probably speak to. Bela and Joffrey. And the differences between them. Rhaenys says she realizes what the world is, just like it realized itself upon her. It realized itself upon Rhaenyra when she was announced as heir to the throne. I would love it for it to be Bela. And then there's Joffrey. Corlys says, both don't know anything about the sea. What? The point of this is, Rhaenys is smart. She knows war is coming and he's going to be involved in that war. She is saying, basically, you may not come back from this. You need to consider who's going to be the heir to Driftmark. Meanwhile, there's a couple things happening here. You have this whole side story about the Hulls, his bastard children. Let's not forget about that. How is that going to come to play? What about the dragon seeds? Ulf and all these other Targaryens in the wind, like Hugh the Hammer. All this is setting up something, right? Right, Sharondy? Right. Okay. More importantly than anything else, she's being realistic. An heir has to be chosen. She's trying to be kind and subtle about it. He picks up what she's dropping and goes, I'm not going to die. So that's that. Sharondy, I want to ask you something because I hadn't realized this until now. Do you think that Corlys's condition may have been influenced by Rhaenys? The fact that he got sick, that Rhaenys was trying to make him sick so he didn't have to himself go out to war?
No, because he was hurt in a battle at the Stepstones when they were fighting the crab feeder. But no, I don't think that at all.
Listen, we all acknowledge he's really, really smart.
Rhaenys has more honor than that. She wouldn't take him out. That would be beneath her.
If that was the case, she would make him sick now so he wouldn't go to war.
The broth. Have some broth. The broth has the poison in it.
I think Rhaenys has more honor than that. I think she's worried that he's going to die, but I don't think she would ever do anything to stop him from fulfilling his duty. This is what the men do. They go out and they fight and they protect their families and they fight for their home. And
they still have to think about the heirs.
I don't see Rhaenys doing anything to jeopardize
She
that.
would feel like if he couldn't do what he needed to do, then he wouldn't feel like a man, and she would be responsible for that.
Yeah.
Ugh.
She'd be emasculating him by doing that.
Well, I mean, which is how he takes it.
This is what the lords of the manors do.
I'm not saying any of that. But what I am saying is that she's basically saying you haven't chosen an heir, line of succession. And because he hasn't chosen his heir, well, you got the hulls in the wind. And if they make a claim, obviously, Alan, he said it to me himself, he owes me his life. Well, life is a throne.
That wouldn't really be so terrible, would it? These men know the sea.
Okay, well, now we're going to have a conflict between the hulls, the bastard
you gotta
children of
remember
Corlys.
Laenor is still out there too.
Well, so is he? That's
true.
The question.
Yeah.
Because he's without his dragon. They mentioned it in this episode that Sea Smoke is Laenor's dragon.
The dragons are getting restless, but all of the dragons are getting restless because they smell war. Sorry, spoilers for anybody. But yes, they are dragon riders, the hulls. But what I was thinking was, instead of bringing the hulls into it, they were going to bring Laenor back. Laenor might be dead now, and that's why
that's kind of what I was thinking.
Sea Smoke is so restless. But Sea Smoke could also be restless because all the dragons are restless. They smell war, they sense it, and so that's why they could also be restless.
Right, and Laenor doesn't have to be dead to do that.
Dragons only get a new rider when their old rider has died.
Ooh, okay.
But what if so much time has passed? How does a dragon know that its rider is dead?
The blood connection.
Right, the blood
magic.
I had another question though. If Laenor did come back, is that going to nullify Rhaenyra's marriage to Daemon?
He would still be consort.
Well,
You can have a
because
consort
they would be like, we didn't know Laenor was alive.
But he is, and now he's back. So what does that mean for Rhaenyra and Daemon?
In true medieval times, it would make her marriage to Daemon illegitimate, and it would make her kids with Daemon illegitimate. But in this show, who knows what they might do? Laenor could come back with a different identity, and only the family know. He could come back and be a son they didn't know that Corlys had or something like that.
I feel like they keep bringing up his dragon. They're not talking about any other dragons. They are specifically talking about Laenor's dragon. That leads me to believe that they are reminding us of him. Like, hey, he exists.
And who's to say that he's not on Dragonstone, just not riding around on Sea Smoke? That maybe he is there and he wants to be close to his family without being detected. I mean, it's not that
maybe
big
he's
of
been like watching the whole time.
Yeah, like maybe he got word of what's been happening and is like, okay.
He's been gone several years. So when he left, he had shaved his head. How do you know what they look like? You know?
Yeah.
And he's been gone for
Mhm.
several years. Even Davos said it in Game of Thrones when he told Gendry to go back. He's like, nobody's going to recognize you. You've been gone for years. Just go back to King's Landing and pretend like nothing happened.
Poor Rhaenys is what I'm saying. And Corlys ain't that bad either. I like the way he treats her. He's kind of funny.
They're
I want
even
to
though
go
their
away.
marriage was arranged, they obviously turned it into a love match.
Mm-hmm. Well, folks, if you like this love match between us and you, head over to ratethispodcast.com/squawking dead. 5 stars and a heart emoji of take your pick. There's so many. Use all of them is all we need to know that you love us. But tell us what you liked. Tell us what you didn't like. But remember to tell us, speak your mind after every episode. And if you really like what we're doing and you think we're on the right track and you kind of want to get even closer to us and not have imposter syndrome, head on over to either ko-fi.com/squawkingdead or patreon.com/squawkingdead and just follow us because it's your way of getting our recording schedules. Following is free. Attending our recording sessions is free. We welcome your input in the chat as we discuss. But say you want to take your involvement further. You want to be part of Squawking Dead's court. Well, consider tipping us for 30 days of supporter back content, instant access to our Discord, even tipping will get you a bunch of perks in the Ko-fi shop. And if you happen to join one of our membership tiers on either Ko-fi or Patreon, for as little as $1 a month, you'll get more access to our Discord, the ability in the Whispers and Survivors tiers to get 50% off in the merch store, access to your camera and mic when we play Jackbox games so you can play along with us on stream. And if you happen to join, well, either the Whispers and Survivors tiers, you'll be able to get a free classic t-shirt upon signing up. Whispers will have to wait another 3 months. And if you join the Survivors tier, you can join us together in studio to add your thoughts alongside us for these episode breakdowns. I've been your host, David Cameo, and I was joined by Cosmom09, Rachel, Burt, Sharon D, aka Blazy Gardner, and we were happy to deliver the finer points, the facts over feelings conversation on House of the Dragon's 3rd episode of its 2nd season titled The Burning Mill. They should have said the Battle of the Burning Mill. How that sounds way more badass, but maybe that's the point. It's just the Burning Mill. Take care. We'll see you in the reaction live stream. Remember to follow us on youtube.com/squawkingdead so you can participate in that stream, telling us your feelings over facts as a result of watching that episode right after the episode. Until then, remember that we are Squawking Dead.